You're on 702 ABC Sydney with James Valentine this afternoon. Is there a connection between elite athletes and the use of illicit drugs? Perhaps even if you just think about it, on the surface of it, the kind of person who wants to push themselves to get that adrenaline rush and to achieve at an absolute high level may well have a similar mentality to someone who seeks the same kind of thing through drug and alcohol addiction. How widespread is it throughout professional sport, and what do we know about the whole thing? Psychologist Cameron Brown is addressing a conference at the Swinburne University Sport and Recreation Conference, and is dealing with some of these things. He's delivering a paper has delivered a paper called "Illicit Drugs in Sport: The Silent Epidemic." And Cameron joins us this afternoon to illuminate some of these areas. Cameron Brown, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
It's, I suppose, it's come right into the forefront. I mean, with the Lance Armstrong story, are you talking about the use of performance-enhancing drugs or the use of other what we usually term recreational drugs?
Yeah, we're talking more about recreational drugs, including alcohol as well. Lance is a bit of a different story in that he used the drugs for performance enhancement, obviously, rather than in terms of addiction.
Yep. So, and how widespread is the use of alcohol and illicit drugs in that level of sport, do you think?
It's an exceptionally hard question to answer, obviously, due to the illegality, I suppose, of using illicit drugs, and also the fact that it's frowned upon in competitive sport. Studies recently done indicate that maybe 7% of elite athletes who were studied in that study may use illicit drugs, but it's a very hard thing to tell. We know that around 1 in 20 Australians suffers from a substance use disorder, so we could be looking at that number as well with athletes.
Because it's sort of, I mean, maybe it feels a little counterintuitive, but I think that the very fittest of us would then go and use drugs in some way. But in another sense, the very fittest of us may well be quite capable of it. You know what I mean? They'll recover. It'll feel like part of their life.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you did say, that seeking out the adrenaline, that seeking out the what we call using the reward system in the brain, that it may be competitive sport may be a way of masking that faulty reward system. Elite athletes may definitely be using it, using drugs and alcohol after they've finished their competitive career or during their competitive career to, I suppose, boost those levels of excitement and reward back up in their brains.
I suppose it's also, the other factor that may come into this is you've had, particularly after your career is over at 25, at 27. There can be a great emptiness there, can't there?
Yeah, absolutely. And between the ages of 20 and 25, our brains don't stop developing. So we're looking at young men, especially, who are completing their what we're calling their professional careers by the age of 25, when they've just really matured as a person. And there is that potential that there's problems with social skills, there's problems with the ability to manage themselves financially, and also we're removing the big safety net that they've got, things like sponsorship and financial deals that they may have. And so there is that tendency that they may turn to drugs and alcohol as a way to adapt to life after sport.
They may also feel, I wonder if in many, particularly again if we're talking about afterwards, there's a sense of, look, it's, the shackles are off now. I've spent 8 years at an elite level training and being disciplined, and every single moment's been attended to, and every single, substance I've ever taken has been attended to. Thank God I can relax a bit and kick back and have a drink.
Yeah, absolutely, that could be the case. And for the vast majority of sports people finishing their career, that's not a problem. But those who may be predisposed to addiction or alcohol or drug problems, that tends to be the beginning of the spiral. They tend to start with a little bit of use, and then we see a downward spiral from there.
So you're suspecting that are you suspecting, or do you feel like that there's a disproportionate amount of high-level athletes who have alcohol and drug problems?
I would suspect that there's more than we know about, obviously, because statistically speaking, on a census level, there's a greater percentage than what's reported in elite athletes at this stage. So whether it's due to some demographic variables obviously change that a little bit, and one being fitness and things like that. But we do suspect that there are more than what we're seeing out there.
What have you seen in terms of individuals, in terms of problems? In
terms of problems, well, we do see a lot of people come through clinics, obviously, that that they may have had a sporting injury sometimes, and that leads into addiction because they're prescribed medication. But then there's the other people who simply use drugs and alcohol all the way through their professional career, not as a way of boosting their performance, but a way of keeping the excitement going and trying to beat those lulls in competition, or simply just bonding with other either group members of a individual sport or team members or other staff in the sporting arena.
Well, we certainly see in many sports a great association with alcohol, don't we? Big drinking after a win, big party mentality, that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we still see to this day the Mad Mondays advertised on, shown on news reports after teams finish their seasons, and that's well and truly accessible for everyone to see. And like you say, there is a very big association between sports and I suppose the fun and excitement of alcohol use or drug use even sometimes.
I wonder if the sports themselves care much about this aspect of their players. They've got enough to deal with performance-enhancing drugs, with the sort of drugs that are illegal in terms of the sport. I wonder if they care much about this aspect of their players' behaviour.
Yeah, I think they definitely would, and if they don't, they very much should, because the problem with addictive substances and alcohol is that they can lead to a decline in sporting performance, absolutely, because of the effects that they have on the body. I think education is key from a sport and club level to make sure that these players and athletes know what they're in for if they do start to use illicit drugs or alcohol to an excessive extent.
Now, you work at a clinic dealing with alcohol rehabilitation and the like?
Yes, I do. Yep.
Yeah. And so what sort of things do you see coming through there? Is this what I'm wondering is, have you actually seen sort of like a lot of sportsmen coming through, or is it just something you've started to think about? Why have you decided to look at this area? I mean, we could look at lawyers in the same way, couldn't we?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a very good point. High stress with what we see in the clinics, especially for what we call functioning addicts, is that the people who we see are they're in high stress environments. The unfortunate thing about that is that sometimes they perform very, very well at their chosen profession, whether they're a lawyer, whether they're a dentist, whether they're a housewife or an athlete. They continue to perform very well while everything else may fall apart, and that tends to mask exactly what is going on in their life.
Well, so I suppose what I'm wondering whether there's any particular connection between sport, or there's another sort of connection between the kind of person who's disposed to addiction in drugs and alcohol.
Yeah, we couldn't say definitively that it is sports people, but what we know is that we do see definitely sports people coming through these clinics, through private clinics for treatment. And like I said, we can't definitively say that it's absolute that they're seeking enjoyment or that reward circuitry stimulation. We can't say that that's a definitive. But what we can say from the stories that we've seen on the news of several athletes who have recently come out about their addictions, that it is there. It's definitely there. And anecdotally speaking, that excitement and that need to continually strive to be the best can lead people to illicit drug use.
Cameron Brown, thanks for talking to us.
Thank you very much.
Good to get some information there, and thanks for sharing your expertise. That's psychologist Cameron Brown, who's from a clinic called The Cabin, and who's also been addressing the Swinburne University Sport and Recreation Conference, was held in Melbourne.